And then from there, I just kind of meander for a moment right when the stream starts. I do have ads turned on because
All good.
I figure if I ever see money from, you have to hit a threshold where like enough has been like kind of banked and then they send you a check. So I'm like, if and when I ever see money from that down the line, I'm just gonna like buy an edited collection, like buy a book to support the stream. That's the plan.
Nice.
That's the
Very
plan.
nice.
Because I do not have, the one thing with the remote adjunct teaching is I don't have library access close.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
so like I can kind of go and get hooked into one from time to time, but it's not a convenient thing. So
Yeah.
I have to kind of have my own copies of everything or have like Kindle versions and things like that. So
Yeah, that's been a similar thing where it's like I have access to all of the online resources through Eastman. One thing that's is fairly lucky is my choir job is relatively close to Duke University, and they actually
oh,
have pretty easy parking for their music department um, for outsiders. UNC Chapel Hill also has a fantastic library, but parking's a little more of a challenge on their campus for outsiders.
yeah. All right, everyone. Welcome to Friday. It's Kudomusicology time. I'm your host, Musicologess, and with me today is the wonderful Stephen Armstrong. Hi, Stephen. So happy you're here.
It's so good to be with you, Dana.
We
It's been entirely too long. I remember taking my partner to his first musicology conference, and that was NACVIGM, I think in 2019 in Hartford.
mm,
And I think that is the last time that we met in person. So it's
that's
been
the last
entirely too
time I
long.
traveled at all because I didn't go to AMS that year, even because my wedding
Oh,
was in November. So I skipped AMS that year. So that was the last time I traveled. It's wild.
it's been a crazy couple years.
Yeah, I think you're somebody that like the very first time you presented, probably at NACFIGM, I think would have been when I met you. I was impressed with
Oh,
your whole deal. You just have a very first of all just very sophisticated modeling of concepts and ideas, and I just enjoyed the paper itself. But you also have a really beautiful presentation style.
I'm super flattered. Yeah, I remember that paper fairly well. That was music appreciation in the Mario Brothers.
Yes.
Back when I was sort of Yeah, my advisors in grad school kept telling me, don't send. Am I allowed to use bad language on this?
Yeah.
Okay. I was going to say, don't send in half-assed projects. And I try not to send in half-assed projects. But one of the things that I did do kind of early in my PhD career was send out lots of things because I just wanted to see what everyone was up to. I wanted to
Mhm.
see what the Ludomusicology people were up to. I wanted to see what the early music people were up to. And so I sent a bunch of projects. Some of them did not go so well, but I remember NACVIGM was a really good experience. And so I kept sending things to them. And yeah, that ended up actually becoming so my dissertation was on opera studies, but I study opera studies a little bit as a video game music scholar, and that I'm really interested in sort of theatrical space. A lot of the same issues actually that have come up in my Ludo work really were kind of fruitful lenses for my historical work in the more distant past.
Yeah. Well, just for the sake of folks here, where, like, at what point did Ludo enter the conversation for you? Was that something that was at the very beginning of your process? Because I know for me, I came in as a minimalist opera scholar. At least that was the plan. And then along the way, I sort of was almost like given permission by my faculty to sort of explore video games, which had always been a part of my life since I was pretty little. I'm
Yeah.
curious what your trajectory was like with that.
But fairly similar. So I was during my master's program, I was kind of doing a dual track piano performance and musicology. I knew that I was really interested in both writing and performance, and musicology seemed like a really good way of merging those two interests. So I started, my master's thesis was on Liszt. That was kind of my earliest research that I was working with, just because it was more familiar from my piano work. And then when I was starting to get into when I went to PhD programs, I started, it was a little bit more of an open box. I knew that I wanted to do some romantic music, but also I was a longtime gamer and had spent many, many happy hours with friends, fighting games, racing games, Super Smash Brothers, and lots of JRPGs, which I used to play with friends in my parents' living room. Especially Fire Emblem. I have very fond memories of Fire Emblem, getting together with a couple of my friends, and we plot out our campaign. What's going on with this. And of course, I was taking music classes at the same time, and so I was listening to all of the music. And it's like, hey, there's a lot going on here. This is really interesting, both from kind of a structural perspective, what's happening musically, and also, this was the music that I was listening to in my car. I'm seeing someone in the chat talking about Fire Emblem OSTs. Yep.
Yeah. Welcome, Ian. It's good to see you. Yeah. We have a student at Hartford right now that's been very interested, wrote a Fire Emblem paper for me in the spring, actually in the early music seminar.
Oh, wow.
It's really
That's
cool.
fantastic.
It's really cool. So we'll have to get John Michael to talk to you at some point. You can nerd out about
that
Fire
would be
Emblem
lovely.
games.
Yeah, send him my way. Have him send me an email.
Yeah, that's awesome. I didn't really play the Fire Emblem game. There's a lot of lacuna in my life. I imagine this is true of everyone because there's like tens of thousands of video games that exist, but one of my big ones is I've never played a Fire Emblem game. I've never played a Pokemon game either, which usually surprises more people. Yeah, I know. My husband's been like waiting basically since we started dating to like sit me down and maybe stream it, like watch me fail at Pokemon kind of situation.
I don't know. If you have a significant amount of JRPG experience, like those are transferable skills. You can
I think so.
Yeah, I think you're gonna kick butt when you go through Pokemon the first time.
Most of what I know about Pokemon comes from the anime, which my brother watched a little bit, and I sort of I know some of the Pokemon by name. But yeah, it's definitely a huge gap in my knowledge. But there's a lot. I mean, even like major franchises, there's so many Zelda games I never played. Like,
I know.
There comes a point where like being a console gamer like is so expensive, and so my brother and I after a while just became PC gamers for a while, and that changes what you're playing. And yeah. So, this paper specifically, this was an ACFAGM talk, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember which year. I just looked this up.
Some year.
I think it was 20. Let me think about this. Do you remember what I was talking about at Hartford? This was at Hartford.
Was this Hartford?
Yeah, I think this was Hartford. And it was at the Music and the Moving Image conference that same spring.
Okay, yeah. So they were able to kind of refine and and then this being JSMEG, did they approach you or did you just go, ooh, JSMEG, let me submit?
They approached me. So this was very early in JSMEG, and they were not real well known because of course it was a new thing, and so I think they were having to go out and do a little bit more headhunting. I don't think they have that problem anymore, but yeah, I met Tim Summers at Music and the Moving Image, and then a couple months later he was like, hey, how would you like to maybe expand this? And I said that would be great. How's the timeline going to work out? Dissertation is bearing down on me, but we were able to make it work out.
Yeah, when Tim actually is the reason I got published the first time. So shout out to Tim for supporting.
Shout out to Tim.
Yeah, because I gave the Tetris paper at Ludo, and then he's like, hey, publish this in the soundtrack. And then I went to my advisor like, dissertating, like, do I like turn him down and wait till I'm done? And he was like, no, publish now. He's like, I know it'll take a little time away, but he was like, the way the market is these days, like you kind of need a publication or two coming out to be competitive. So I was really glad my advisor like recognized that and said that to me. He's like, yeah, it'll take a little bit of time, but like, I'll help you with it. We'll go. So
yeah, my advisor was kind of a little bit similar. It's like, yes, it'll take a little bit of time away, but you're passionate about this, go ahead and do it. Your dissertation will still get done.
Yeah,
I will make you finish your dissertation.
It gets done, or you leave and you join a commune. Those were my
or sometimes both. Sometimes you
finish the dissertation on a commune.
Yeah, and then you join the commune.
Yeah, exactly. I joked about that a lot, that I was just like, I need to have like 8 backup plans because I was so used to failure.
Yeah.
through my entire. I mean, it's partially like conservatory musician
Yeah.
syndrome. You know, you're like used to failing constantly
Uh-huh.
in small ways, like almost every week. That's the whole point of improving. You're being told what isn't
Yeah.
right. But then also the recession hit right when I was graduating undergrad, so I did like everyone was like, "Oh, apply to all these schools for your PhD," and then like rejected flat across the board. So that's why I got
Yeah.
my master's in violin performance. Fun
Well,
fact, it came out of failure
yeah.
because everyone was basically like, there's no money. Like, we can't fund a grad student right now. So sorry. So they're like, come back
If it
in a
makes
couple
you feel
years.
any better, I too was rejected from all PhD programs the first year I applied.
Yeah.
And
High
then,
five.
yeah, here we are.
Here we are. It can work. And I like to tell that story because I want people to like know how much failure is a part of the process
Hmm.
and how it can reshape you in really constructive ways. It doesn't just have to be an end of a road, but it does sort of like help you refocus and reevaluate what you
So,
need and want too. So it was ultimately a good experience. I liked getting the more performance background, and I think
hmm
you would agree that's continued to be good, but also a part
yeah.
of the income. So that's
Yeah,
been
it's
it's been
it's
important.
very useful to have, be able to perform at weddings and things like that. That is,
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely. Being able to arrange "Midnight" by Taylor Swift on a moment's notice.
awesome, awesome.
I haven't had that just came out, so I haven't had requests for it yet, but had some
Oh, but you will,
had
you
some
will.
interesting requests over the summer. I always do. I think Bridgerton
Yeah.
has really helped with that too. People think like, oh, anything can be a string quartet, and then
Yeah.
they are emboldened to ask for Billie Eilish or whatever they want, which is so fun.
I recently, a wedding that I played a couple months ago, they asked for Justin Bieber's Intentions as
Mm,
the walkout piece. I was like, why not? If it makes the bride happy,
I've
why
done.
not?
Is it Anyone by Justin Bieber? Is that the title? I did that. That one actually is really pretty as a recessional. My
I'm gonna have
string
to look that
my
one up.
string quartet of it is pretty good. So
Mm.
anyway, let's get to this lovely piece of J. Smig history here, sounding the grind, musicospatial stasis in JRPG battle themes. This is a really great piece. If you haven't read it, it is, I think, very assignable to undergrads if you're teaching a video game music course. Even if they don't read sheet music, I have a lot of non-majors when I do the video game courses, and they tend to be able to follow this one pretty well. So it's a good recommendation. Stefan agrees; it's so good. So we start with Will Gibbons, as many of us do. So
It's
Will
a solid
Gibbons
start.
in 2015 gave an ACFGM paper where he discussed the main battle theme of Ni no Kuni, Wrath of the White Witch from 2011, which was scored by Joe Hisaishi, and who has done most of the Studio Ghibli films. And this, of course, was that. It was a full game of that sort of beautiful full animation, right?
Hmm.
And the music for the battle is certainly lovely to listen to on its own, but it doesn't work as a battle theme. It's sort of in this uncanny valley. It's like too slow, and you write that it's a perceived mismatch of the music and its context, and consequently a failure to immerse the player in combat. Let's start that for a moment. Now imagine hearing this over and over and over and over when you're playing the game, and you might get a sense of why it doesn't work. Like, okay, now we're kind of getting in. Like, oh, are we still? We're still intro, huh? Okay.
And of course, your trash snap.
There we go. We're in the main theme. So what is that? Like 30 seconds in?
Yeah.
Like super cool.
It's
But
gorgeous.
it's gorgeous as an orchestral piece. The intro is just a little too long, and it's kind of missing a drive once that main melody comes in. It's too slow. If you're in early stages where you're over leveled or something, and you're like defeating stuff easily, you're only hearing that da, 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 da. You're not really getting into it. So video game people, that's like a very obvious thing. Like, it can be a good piece of music, but be bad as a battle theme. So you're interested in this sense of failure. And then we just dive headfirst into the immersion thing. It's very vital to game studies, and as we know, it's very slippery. People use different terms even. They don't just use, I used incorporation in my dissertation for obvious reasons because I was talking about bodies. So corporeal interests there, but immersion, engagement, transportation, like all of these this constellation of ideas in terms of how we interact with video games. And you can do it with other media, but video games, we detect that there's a heightening of this aspect of engaging with it. So everyone's using these terms as if it is very obvious. And yet all the immersion scholars know that it's kind of complicated. And a lot of musicologists are trading in immersion almost by definition, because there's a focus on audiovisual continuity, unless we're looking at Elizabeth Medina Gray's disjunction, and showing how that can also illustrate spaces. But a lot of us are just doing this.
And shout out to Elizabeth, without whom this project wouldn't, a lot of the kind of theoretical underpinnings of this work wouldn't really have been possible without her, series of brilliant papers as well as her dissertation. So shout out to Elizabeth.
Yeah, I think everybody loves modular smoothness and disjunction. It's just such a good.
Yeah, it's just a very accurate and elegant modeling of what is actually happening in video game soundtracks.
I adore it. It comes up in a lot of ways throughout. It's been a nice thread throughout her work, but a lot of other people have found it useful, which is a sign of a good theory. All right. So one of our issues, we don't tend to talk as much about failure. I think, and it's not about calling it bad. I like, this isn't a value judgment about like, again, the music being good or bad, but it's about like, there's something here that's not working for the function. And in general, we focus on the things we like, and we often like games that immerse us, so because it connects attention and pleasure, curiosity, and play. So it makes sense that if
we're bored by the games, we let them go. We don't go and write papers about them usually.
Yeah, we usually like don't finish the game, move on to something else. So we just kind of set it aside. So JRPG battles present this problem because they are ubiquitous and they are repetitive, and JRPGs expect that you are going to grind for levels. And so the sheer amount of repetition of this theme versus just about any other theme in a game, other than maybe the overworld, but that's doing different things. There's just so much repetition that there are design implications for this. And if you only hear a cue once and it doesn't work, you're not going to remember that really. But a lot of games, battle themes, you're hearing them hundreds and hundreds of times. And so the stakes are higher in games that require players to grind for levels. Even if it's not an explicit requirement, a lot of these games are set up such that you can grind. So if you're kind of a completionist player, you want to, I don't know, my example, I always like to teach all of my Final Fantasy VI characters every spell, which is silly because some of them are more physical powerhouses, but I still want that like complete menu when I go to fight Kefka. So like, that's the kind of player I am. It's actually kind of stressful to me when games block off the ability to do that, even though that's more realistic.
You want to have everything. You want to have every option.
Yeah, I just want to have all the options, even though I almost never use most of those spells. But yeah, Man, I'm really going to hear those battle themes over and over and over and over and over. So, this is kind of the leading questions here. Ni no Kuni's relative failure in this arena can provide us with an important clue. Battle music is first and foremost a variety of functional music, a genre that fans measure not by its sonic beauty, but by its psychological effectiveness. This point leads directly to a number of pressing questions. How then do battle themes function? How do these functions relate to the all-important concerns of immersion and interactivity? How do we evaluate the effectiveness of battle music? And finally, can we create a preliminary theory of battle music composition? The answer is yes, and this article does. So then we get our what I call the walkthrough statement. Always clear if there's an in this essay. Walk us right through what we're going to do. In this essay, I examine how the grind of JRPG fighting manifests as an integral part of battle music composition, analyzing how a number of standard conventions articulate the spatial logic of a video game world. I focus on 3 sonic gestures. 1, a clear opening audiovisual rupture. 2, the fanfare as cadence. And 3, a sustained period of harmonic stasis underpinning busy surface textures. Julianne Grasso, shout out to Julianne, has recently touched on the first 2, suggesting that RPG musical transitions act as framing devices that further clarify a distinction between the mode of exploration and the mode of battle. If you're like, wait, what's that one? That is her Final Fantasy IV chapter in the Green Book, the RPG book, where she's talking about exploration areas versus like what's happening in battle from a temporal standpoint, which we covered on this very channel. So Stephen here delineates these gestures further while offering a novel reading of harmonic stasis in battle themes. So actually, these you could assign this with Julianne's. Just trying to help people make syllabi here, you know. These would actually pair really nicely together.
Bring the video game research into your classes. Your students are playing the games. They will be interested.
Yeah.
And there's good intellectual work to be done here.
Yeah, I think so. I hadn't thought about pairing. I've assigned this on its own, but it only just occurred to me now. Like this would pair beautifully with Julianne's. Anyway, so the last phenomenon is musicospatial stasis, a musically induced sense of stasis that intermingles with and projects itself onto the visual and narrative fields. In developing these concepts of battle music construction, I seek to nuance earlier work in immersion, which is engaged deeply with questions of how music promotes spatial and psychological flow. I know I'm quoting a lot here. I just thought it was a good paragraph. I extend Grasso's work on how game music mediates time and narrative engagement by demonstrating that game music also conditions the player's sense of space at a visceral level. Because the repetitive grind of JRPG battles interrupts movement through the overworld, I argue that battle themes should be understood as ruptures in the sonic environment, just as the battle stage is a spatial rupture in the overworld. Battle themes therefore make little sense as analytical objects out of context. By definition, they signal a break that impedes the player's movement throughout a larger environment. There it is. Beautiful walkthrough.
One of these days, I'm going to publish some research where I do that senior scholar thing where you take your reader through this whole long story without telling them exactly what's happening and then show at the end, but I don't yet have the street cred, I think, to do that.
I think it's hard to do well too, and what we've kind of seen in chat, I think, because I always try to identify thesis, identify walkthrough, these different things to kind of hang our hats on. A lot of people say I really appreciate when somebody has. As clear as it is, and you can get conflicting advice. I remember professors saying just show, don't tell, don't say in this essay, well, I will do this, but a lot of editors actually tell you to have it. And I think a lot of readers just appreciate being able to, especially if you're in early stage research, get that within the first couple pages and then go, okay, is this what I thought it was? Is this what I needed for the specific project I'm working on? Do I come back to it later?
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
It's good to know where you're going.
Yeah. There is something to be said for weaving the spell over someone, but you have to immerse them. You have to
Yeah.
immerse them into your project and lead them along that garden path with you. And
Hmm.
I
It's
don't
not
know that
easy
I
to do
trust
well.
myself to do that. So I
It's more
think,
just it's easy to do that poorly,
yeah, it's easy to
and
do it
you
poorly.
see it when it's done poorly.
Absolutely. So, and Julianne has talked about this too. We have this push and pull. We have linear progression, but we also have openness and exploration, like if you're in a cave. And then throughout that, you don't just get to explore the cave because there's monsters in the cave and they will attack you, and then there's a rupture that happens there. A lot of, and this is a generalization, admittedly, a lot of Western developers focus on open world elements. There's a citation here to Will's, is it the post millennial RPG
Yeah,
thing?
I think it's partially that, and then the Green Book on RPGs, I think, has this kind of in the background where one of
Yeah.
the it's been a while since I've looked at it, but I believe one of the sections is more on JRPGs, which are more linear, and then there's a section. Maybe I'm remembering this wrong, but anyway,
Yeah,
that's kind of in the
it's in the
background of the.
constellation of things, and Will's done the
Yeah.
localization work where he gets into some differences between like Western and
Hmm.
Japanese. Yeah, so he's done this in a few different places if you're interested in this concept. But
Yeah.
one of the big again, this is overall differences between them is a lot of Western RPGs allow for total character creation, for example, versus a lot of JRPGs, there's kind of a pre-existing cast of characters, and you're stepping into the role of maybe the party leader. You don't necessarily, if I'm playing like a Final Fantasy game, I don't necessarily see myself as any one character in that narrative. I kind of see myself as like inhabiting all of them. But if I'm
Hmm.
playing like a Western JRPG and I've created a character and maybe it looks like me or maybe it looks nothing like me, depending on my play style. That's like very obviously me projecting myself into the game in a particular way.
Hmm.
So,
This is one of the reasons why I actually have trouble playing most Western RPGs is like I want to inhabit a different character and I want there to be sort of a story that I don't have to create with that character. I don't know, it's interesting. I also have lots of friends who, adore Skyrim and
mm-hmm.
all of the other
So you're not a
you know
D&D player is what you're saying.
well, the thing is I do actually
Talk
I
about
have
coming
a
up with your lore and
yeah, I do actually have a weekly D&D with a couple of my siblings. So we have this kind of fantasy world that we've been working on for years and years and years. But that's kind of a special case.
yeah.
Um, it's like I want one or the other, and the open world RPG inhabits this kind of no man's land for me.
Yeah. And I like exploration that is the space has to be compelling. It can't just be an open
Hmm.
world. I've talked about this before that there are a lot of games that are just like every game has to have an open world now. I specifically mentioned D&D knowing that Pete Smucker was in chat. Pete is a DM. Um,
Oh, very nice.
and at some
It's
point
hard
we're going to
work.
figure out a way to do like, maybe an online D&D with Pete DMing because I think that would be so fun. Yeah.
You absolutely can D&D over a Zoom. I
Yeah.
do that most weeks,
I
and
think
it's
that would be
great
so
fun.
fun. Yeah, so I like there to be open world, but a lot of games you have to do it well. You have to create a space that I want to explore and have meaningful interactions within that space. It can't just be here's a huge map and nothing to do. So there's a balance because filling
Yeah.
that world can lead to a lot of like it's kind of the same thing over and over, and so you want them to be well plotted, well scripted, so that like even if it is essentially like a fetch quest or defeat this enemy and bring back something to the like there's a lot of the same types of tasks,
Mhm.
but if you feel invested, The Witcher 3 did a great job at this.
Yeah, it can be done really, really well.
I felt like, yeah, it's kind of, there are a lot of similar types of tasks throughout that world, but I liked that sense of, kind of getting into something with only one perspective, and then sort of like as you go to the task, you're like, wait, is this monster actually bad? So anyway, JRPGs tend to have more linear storytelling. And I think importantly, this character difference is really felt by the player. So getting in and out of battle. We have this entrance and exit from this battle stage where everything is spatially different, visually different for the player. And so the discussion of the shatter, getting into it, some kind of a signal, an alert, a warning, a siren. We're getting into battle. Pay attention. And then the fanfare of, yes, we're done. And how that frames the whole experience. And so, as we know, we get musical loops for things like dungeons, battles, towns, very common. In a lot of Western RPGs, we are moving toward more atmospheric cues, more use of silence, more interactive forms of underscoring. And again, this is all very general because like Breath of the Wild has plenty of has plenty of like open space and silence and things like that. But the focus here is going to be this kind of classic model of a JRPG where we have battles. And they hem gamers in. I liked that phrasing, hem gamers in, and act as obstacles to further spatial and narrative progression because you're like, I got to deal with this first. You could run away, and sometimes things make it so you can't run away, but you still have to deal with it before you can move on. So we get a visual break as the game shifts computational systems. We do get more seamless integration over time, and in some games there isn't like that huge break. Even early games, even by Ocarina of Time, you mentioned, we didn't have a tear, just a musical cue indicating that we were close to enemies. And this is really common in like action RPG or action adventure where like there is more seamlessness, but the kind of classic RPG, they like battle is a separate mode entirely. So let's find some tears, shall we? Karen Cook's favorite, Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link. If she's in chat, she's going to say, my nemesis. As it's a lot of people's nemesis. Cause like,
I've still never beaten the game. Yeah. I've watched my siblings beat it several times, but...
Yeah, see? My nemesis. Nice. Yeah, it is. I've beaten it once, but I was like late 20s, and it took a lot of swearing. A lot of attempts. Because man, is it a pain. Final Fantasy X, some really good examples of tears. We're going to listen to a couple, but there are also some good counter examples, even as early as Legend of Zelda. We are fighting things on the overworld. We aren't having a separate battle space there. Chrono Trigger is almost like halfway between, I think, because you do get some kind of a sound most of the time. There's like a little like scream, or some kind of like a little rupture sound, and then the battle music starts, but the field doesn't really change. We don't get the spatial rip. We're all gonna get together and watch Karen play Zelda 2.
I'm sure Karen would love that.
Yeah, angry video game nerd style. Just like swearing at it, throwing the controller. All right, here's some examples. So, go back. All right, Zelda 2. Such good music in this game too. Wow! And because this is still action-y, we're not having the like selecting from a menu, fight, and then it fights. You're still like stabby at things, but notice how like we had the complete changeover and rupture into the space with the sound, and then the screen changed over from an overworld top-down view to this side scroller. So one more time. I've always loved this battle theme. It's so syncopated, it just like pushes you forward.
Yeah. And actually it's really interesting, something I've never heard before, but I want to now, maybe sometime later, look at like what's the harmonic change between the overworld to the, because I don't know. That's interesting. I want to see what's happening harmonically if you think of the overworld theme and the battle theme as part of the same, two different themes within the same score or something.
Yeah, hold on one second. I have transcriptions, so let me see if I can find them quickly.
You have receipts.
I do have receipts of Zelda 2. We're gonna see. Zelda 2 tracks. Is that it? Yes, that looks right.
What keys are these in?
Right, that's do, 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 do. All right. It looks like A flat for the overworld. I did the thing where I didn't put key signatures in. I just did the flats where there's flats because I was transcribing off a tracker. And since I wasn't using this for I was just doing a transcription. Usually when I go to then put it in a project, I do like go in and do that. Yeah.
No worries. I see Karen from the chat. There's no joy in this game, only rage.
Only rage.
And then a question from Ian: is the battle theme one of the different ones from the Famicom when they ported it to the NES in the US? That's a question. That's a technical question. I don't really know, but
for Zelda 2, I don't remember, but I don't think it's a different track, but it is very possible that it's using the extended channels on the FDS.
Okay.
Because there were more channels. Yeah, I actually am very not familiar. I'm familiar with the FDS for Zelda 1 and the differences there, but Zelda 2, and most of the ones there, it's just a richer texture because there's a couple more channels in the mix. Zelda 2, I have no real understanding of I don't think I've ever seen the FDS version of that. All right, let me find battle. All right, so what did I say? I said A flat, right?
Yeah, I think it was A flat.
Yes, that is right. And then battle, scroll down, house, overworld. Bum, bum, bum. G minor. So it's actually a slippage down from A flat major to G minor.
Almost like a Phrygian turn or something. That's interesting. I would have to do some thinking about what if anything that might mean, or what kind of the effect of that is. But I just was kind of struck by that anew. I haven't heard that transition in some time now.
Yeah, and approximate beats per minute. Overworld is 130 to the quarter note, and battle is about 200 to the quarter note. So, see, my transcriptions are useful sometimes, even when I never do anything with them. They're just for me. I really liked the music in that game, and I wanted to have copies of it. I do have like string quartets of it, so I haven't done nothing with it. I just haven't published with it. Because I don't really have much to say about it other than I like Zelda 2's music, even though the game is infuriating for people. So yeah, we got the good example of the tear there. And then, of course, the iconic transitional cue to get into battle in Pokemon Yellow, which, of course, I haven't played, but I know the music. The little Pikachu sound. It's so funny. Yeah, so we get this spirally, beautifully transcribed.
Not by me. That one I saved myself some time and found that from a fan transcription.
You know, because otherwise you're like opening it in a tracker.
Yeah.
It's a process. Yeah, it's nicely done. But I love these little leaps too. It's like, even though it is spiraling downward, we have this like high, like it's almost like a warning light, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
actually, yes.
Yeah,
the warning light blinking.
Mm-hmm. We're going into battle. Prepare yourself. So the counterexample here, you mentioned Legend of Zelda. Chrono Trigger has this more seamless transition, but there is still a tear, just not visually. So here's an example of that from pretty early in the game. I found one where there wasn't a scream. It was just the rustling.
Okay.
But if I go a little earlier, like when we're in the here, we'll hear the scream.
Oh, yep.
And then the menu comes up, but the field hasn't changed. Other than that, as you will look at in a bit, the battle theme itself conforms to our expectations of how it should sound. But so we get this process. Battle begins with the tear. Then there's battle music that is kind of keeping us in the mode of fighting. And then if victory, then fanfare. If defeat, then game over. If escape, then that's variable. Sometimes there's no cue. Sometimes there's a little like running away footsteppy sound effect. I'm thinking of like Final Fantasy games have that. The early ones. I think Dragon Quest, Dragon Warrior has the little like kind of running away. So there sometimes there's a little sound effect. Sometimes there's just no cue. It just like the screen goes black and you go back to the overworld. The transition from victory out of battle is less of a rupture. It doesn't have that like that shriek, that tear. It's a lot less sudden. It's less violent. Victory fanfares often use flat 6, flat 7, 1 cadence, opening up into a celebratory theme of some sort in a closely related key. And often fanfare and victory are treated as a single track on OSTs for this reason, official soundtracks. And the tension of battle just kind of dissipates. Yeah, Mario cadence, exactly. So that's one of the ones. Which is kind of funny because it's this rising, I have triumphed, I have won, but you go down the flagpole.
Yeah.
But how would you even, I guess you could probably come up with a convincing fanfare that is some kind of like descent resolution.
That would be an interesting technical challenge.
Yeah, I have to think
compose something that sounds final and sounds celebratory that has stuff.
That doesn't like make us think of like a lament bass. Yeah. Here it is again in Final Fantasy. It goes on from there. But so these are like our tears, right? We get a whole theme after that is celebration as you're like figuring out the items or the experience you gained. Mario doesn't need that because the level's over. So we just have the little like victory fanfare. Here we get fanfare and then a little like yay theme. But it also is kind of not obtrusive. You're just kind of figuring out what you need to read on screen, and then you go back. And then finally, Tales of Symphonia. I like that you picked a lesser known, possibly, example here. Oop, go back, play that.
It's an example I know very well.
Similarly. Let's do that one more time. There we go. Flat 6, flat 7, 1. There it is.
It still gives me chills a little bit. That was so many hours of my adolescence right there with my little brother.
Yeah. What's the age difference between you and your brother?
About 3 years exactly. But he's always been kind of mature for his age, so it's almost more like he was my older brother. I was always a little bit more... I was a little bit more out there. We'll say that. Say that.
My brother's 5 years older than me, and he was my introduction to video games. So I know that well. But that was enough of an age gap that I wasn't really playing with him, especially when I was really low. I mean, he brought the NES home when I was 5, so I was mostly like watching him play, and I have theories as to, because I wasn't having to worry about playing, that's one of the reasons I gravitated to the sound, because I was like hearing things in a different way.
Yeah, you were processing the game more as a listener than as a player.
Yeah, and to this day, even just like watching stuff, film, TV, Joe says that like I have that mode engaged where like I kind of notice things orally like first and very immediately. Like I tend to pick up on things and sometimes to false worry, because like there are moments in Assassin's Creed where the music to me is indicating danger, but it's just like, oh, this is a restricted area. It's not necessarily like, it's not like there's battle approaching, but it took me a while to get used to that when I played Origins, where I was like, wait, is something attacking me right now? It was because the cue was like tense. So
something's about to happen.
Something's about to happen. No.
And then it doesn't.
And then it doesn't. The propaganda cadence.
Wait, I have to see this. Propaganda cadence.
Pairing the progression with a manly achievement. Interesting. That's kind of fun.
Frankie Valli. I'm going to have to look that up after this.
Love that, Andrew. Was that a conference paper or is there a citation in there? That's fascinating. The idea of adding like a gender element to that type of cadence. That's cool. All right, so our battle arena, as we've said, is set off spatially and musically. This allows us to absolutely apply Elizabeth Medina Gray's modularity, smoothness, and disjunction to read those transitions, read those seams between them. So we have our overworld modular loop. We have a disjunct transition, as it should be, because it's alerting you, like, hey, battle. Battle music modular loop, and then disjunct fanfare, although less disjunct than the transition in than the tear. And then that fanfare leads smoothly into a victory theme, and then it either fades out or dissolves. And then there's an overworld modular loop, so that's kind of the whole progression. The actual battle theme. This is surprising to no one. If I asked you all in chat and didn't show the slide, what are the features that we would expect to hear in a JRPG battle theme? I bet a lot of these would come up. Minor keys, fast tempos, use of dissonance, driving bass lines, chaotic textures, relatively harsh / noisy timbres, simple chord progressions, or static bass. Sakuraba's themes aside, as Aaron Price has shown.
Yeah.
But a lot of times we have static bass or very little harmonic motion. Kind of like an oscillating harmonic motion can be common if we move at all. Many other battle themes also have a lot of ostinato action or long pedal tones. So the bass is like almost holding us where we can't move. You have to fight, right? It's like fight, flight, or freeze. The bass is kind of freezing us. And then we can choose to fight or we can, hold down the button to try to escape. So the bass line is grinding in place. These sections can occur at the beginnings of pieces, or sometimes they appear as contrasting sections within larger loops. So we're going to have 4 examples here as kind of mini case studies of this concept and show how they have these features. I like that you threw in Super Mario RPG in here, Fight Against Monsters, because it's unusual. It's in a major key. It's a Mario game. It can't be too dark. But it is structured as a series of ostinatos, and so it's perfectly in line with a functional battle cue. So you don't have to have all of the features, but you're gonna need some of them or most of them for it to work as a battle cue.
Sort of one of the exceptions that illuminates I won't say the rule, but the convention, I guess I would say.
Yeah. So we get this quick bass. There is a progression outlined by the bass, but it's very quick and it keeps repeating. So we do have a sense of not really moving. So as long as the battle lasts, the player's stuck in a mood of relentless cheerfulness. I had to quote that because I liked that. Relentless cheerfulness, which is a good way to describe it. So we can see the bass progression, and then the actual. I had to search through a long play here to find a battle that wasn't so quick that we didn't hear the full progression. So here it is. Still relatively early in the game. Love a little drum roll. The beginning. There we go. We get the whole thing.
This is one of the transcriptions that I had to do myself, and I listened to that so many times over. I'm having sort of flashbacks to when I was putting this together.
That's transcription for you.
I'm gonna have that stuck in my head for the rest of the day.
You're gonna be relentlessly cheerful.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
That's not a bad space to be in. Honestly, it's better relentlessly cheerful than relentlessly a lot of things. So.
No.
Just kind of like whistling it to yourself. Yeah, I've always liked this game. I think it's just such an odd little entry into the Mario series. I always enjoyed this one. Yeah, so perfect example there. We get, internal repetition in the form, the 4 times on that opening theme. We get our little like transitional thing, and then we get a repeat of that, but only 2 times. It's like very, and actually that's similar too. it's all kind of like just a couple elements that we're using over and over and over. Very listenable though, and it works, like which is one of the points here, is that like the repetition in these themes you would think would be just mind-numbing and awful and make you want to throw the controller, but there's almost like a flow argument that becomes kind of unobtrusive. It just kind of like gets you into the flow state of battle, and as you're grinding, it works better if it's not too novel and too disjointed. It has to just kind of be the same thing and let you do your thing and get out of battle.
It would almost be more jarring to the experience if it was something really, really interesting. You'd find yourself kind of drawn out of the battle space.
Yeah, and then you're just like sitting on the menu, not selecting fight or whatever. So I love that you went with Man with the Machine Gun instead of the regular battle theme from 8. Also, there should be an extra I in there. This is not Final Fantasy VII. This is Julianne's and my beloved Final Fantasy VIII. We love this game. And as a kid, I remember getting a lot of flack from fellow gamers because they're like, 8's a love story. I'm like, 8 is just fine. Leave it alone.
8 is a lot of things, including it's lovely.
Yes.
And yes, it's also a love story, and that's
musically, it's wonderful. I always loved the music of 8. It's just, I love it. So this one is constructed around 2 ostinatos. First, we get our first chord change at measure 17, which is about 30 seconds in. And so this one also has that sense of motivic economy and the limited harmonic palette, which give the sense of stasis, like we're hanging out. And these are in the Laguna sequences. So I have it tiny here, and then we'll watch it. And this is the first transition into Laguna, so we'll also just hear the overworld theme, but like it's clearly like a run away. Gotta move on. Also, I just love the orchestral hits. It's like so 90s. Also the clapping. There's our little cadence, which has been a consistent feature in Final Fantasy games. Yeah, this one's a banger. Everybody loves Man with the Machine Gun. It's like a very well-loved battle theme amongst battle themes in history, in particular versus the original one in Final Fantasy VIII.
I see Andrew in the stream chat saying, of course, this battle theme,
yes,
this in all caps, from Final Fantasy VIII would be the one used.
Yep. Yeah, it's a good one. I don't know. I've tried to arrange this for various ensembles, and one of the stumbling blocks in playing this live versus having it like pre-recorded synth is actually the claps. To get the speed, it is. I've tried it. I would like tried to lay it down just like a recording. I can't do it. I know I'm not a percussionist, so I'm sure there are people that can, but it's like so fast, it's hard to get the clarity. And then with the accent pattern that happens in there, it like really shows you like it's better to just have that one on like a synth track.
Because if it's not done exactly right every single time, then it's gonna make the whole texture wonky.
Because there's just like the running 16ths exactly happening, and then over that you have the, that part that comes in. That one's easy. That's fine. But the running 16th, you're like, I can't quite get it. So I haven't really done anything with that one, but I do have it. It's a good one. Yeah, there's really great percussion happening. Very driving, but has all the features. The ostinato. I like that you also slipped into some Persona, because the Persona soundtracks are so good.
They're real different sometimes.
They're eminently listenable. I got the Persona 5 soundtrack for my husband a couple years ago for Christmas on CD, so we could like have it in the car because it's just so good.
Nice.
And of course, Persona it's just, the whole series is just so stylized. You know, it's got these elements we aren't used to hearing in J-pop or in JRPGs. We get like more J-pop, more rock, more hip-hop influence, more like funk. And the visuals do this too. They're like just so slick. So here we get a vocal intro that launches the player into battle. A lot of blues and kind of Phrygian influenced horn riffs, electric guitar power chords. It's in G sharp minor. About 55 seconds in, we get dance piano and J-pop vocals, and then we're toggling between G sharp minor and E major. So we do get progression, but it's that cycling through, or that oscillation. So it's progression, but it's not really. I don't think it's going very, very far. It's more like you're like shifting your weight back and forth. You know,
this is not a Bach chorale. This is EDM.
Right. You're just kind of like going back and forth between the same spot. So you're moving, but you're not really moving. And then we don't get a fanfare in regular battles in this game. It just kind of like dissipates back into the underlying track. So here is a harmonic reduction of two of the sections. I'm guessing this one, just to transcribe, there's like a lot going on.
That was,
is that why you simplified it?
Beyond my skills to transcribe. And we definitely, Pete, we definitely can't have Bach EDM.
Now's a good time for me to explain about attack properties. Do you want to...
This is from early in the game, so...
The enemies you're facing have a weakness that you can exploit. A wisely chosen attack. You attacked the enemy's weak point.
Here's a chance. Let's get him! Get back here, you son of a...
What a stunning victory!
And as you can see, it just dissipates, just falls out. Man, these games are fun. Yeah, my husband played them out of order. I think he did 5, and I think he went backwards. He did like 5, 4, 3. But the music was so good in all of them.
This is making me want to revisit, and I'm sort of wondering if maybe I need to start creating a Christmas list or something.
Always.
Some of these older games.
Always a good time to like add those back in, find a good way to play them.
Mm-hmm.
Come visit me. You can play originals on original hardware on any number of screens.
Very nice.
Yeah, our basement has a really cool setup where we have a home theater with like a projector screen, and we can beam stuff to that and have it big on a whole wall.
Nice.
Which is super fun. But more fun for the video game nerds is we have a network of CRT televisions, including a couple like professional PCM monitors that Joe found on eBay. So the images are just like real crisp and wonderful. And we have a switcher box where you pick the console you want and you pick which television you want it to come out of, and then there's like a code and then you type it in and it sends it to whatever. So you can kind of see things on different sizes of CRT television. I think we've got like 5 or 6 in that size.
That is fantastic. My family has a bunch of classic systems, but they don't have that kind of setup. They're sort of languishing in boxes in my parents' basement.
Yeah, it's kind of intimidating. But he knows how. He's been working on like making a guide for it, so it's a little bit more user friendly. Because I'm still like, wait, how do I send this one to this one? I know some of the codes, but I there needs to be like a little binder that just sits on there, and then we're like, okay, we want to send this one here. But man, it makes a difference to like not only play on original hardware but on the original displays, because upscaling to modern televisions causes all kinds of weirdnesses.
Yeah.
So it's been a cool thing. It's like my little archive right at home. All right, next up, we also a really good choice here, Bravely Second. The sequel to Bravely Default, and The Battle Bell Tolls, which is just a great title. Here we get a guitar solo in ascending diminished triads to open into the theme proper. We get a bass ostinato on C, which is propelling a 2-bar repetition of the rhythmic groove. We get Phrygian neighbor tones, wailing guitars with highly syncopated melody. Again, that kind of driving of syncopation, it like pushes you off the beat, right? Pushes you into the next one. The bass escapes from C after 12 measures, only to slowly walk up and cadence on C again. So we don't go far. We kind of stay in the same spot. So there's that harmonic grind is a focal point of this theme. So here's the opening guitar solo. I also liked the kind of pastoral theme here.
Ready, everyone?
Here I go! Yeah!
All right, then. Ha! Yeah! Yeah! Ah! Ah! It's nothing.
No big deal! Right? Let's see!
So it's not like we can't have a full orchestra, because we get really good use of the strings here. So the problem with the Ni no Kuni is not that it's like fully orchestrated. It has a lot to do with just what's happening texturally and rhythmically and tempo wise and all of these other things. This one reminds me a lot of Final Fantasy IV. Something about the horns and the kind of turns in the melody. Like, I heard this one and I was like, oh wow, somebody like really doing our homework here. Like this, which is, these games are meant to feel like those older JRPGs, kind of like a return to form in a sense. So yeah, that's
callback.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if that was an intentional reference or just having a lot of these features means that it's going to be reminiscent of something. But I imagine that this game does feel like there's a lot of love letters to earlier games. So I kind of wonder if this one was intentional. I know Ryan's looked at those games a lot. He's a big fan of the Bravelies. So we've seen now a bunch of examples of this stasis element. It's all over the place. These are some great examples, but you can grab so many more that fit this mold. So it does cohere. It's not like we're just cherry picking a couple examples and then they happen to work well. This is pretty widespread. It's a very central convention of the form over time. It's not associated with any particular era of JRPGs. And again, it's not a musical weakness. If we're looking at a symphony, we might want to see a theme go somewhere. We might want to see more harmonic motion. But here, a well-constructed musical theme can fail as a battle theme. So the theme's actually a rupture in the sonic fabric of the game, just as the battle space is an interruption of the main exploratory space. The simultaneous interruption of sound and space is articulated musically, creating what we can now call musicospatial stasis. Love that. So then the bass is kind of an interesting moment. It's kind of doing two things at once, kind of paradoxical. The bass is kind of doing two things at once. It is enveloping us due to its acoustic properties, but it's also grounding us through its harmonic content. So it's staying put, but it's also like reaching outward and bringing us into the fold. So it's both like moving and not moving at the same time. And of course, the repetition in it and the rhythmic activity means that it feels like it's moving, but like harmonically, it's just not going anywhere or going very far.
Mm-hmm.
And that repetition mirrors the action of grinding in battle itself, and that's one of the reasons it works. Is there's this mismatch, or this match between what we're doing and what we're hearing. It gets the player into kind of a flow state with it. So even as the battle theme is kind of punctuating the world map all over, the repetition ends up mirroring the repetition in gameplay. So again, it feels right. It feels cohesive, despite having to hear it over and over and over and over and over. And often when one doesn't work, when it becomes grating, it lacks some of these features. So treating battle as a sonic rupture then has an interesting implication for musical immersion, because like, shouldn't the rupture wreck all of the work to build the immersion, right? It's like having you habituate to a musical stimulus, you're exploring, the world map theme is kind of wandering and softer, and it's, kind of just like putting you in that zone. So how does this even work? Doesn't this totally wreck the immersion? How is this seen as good? And a few people have attempted to answer this. A lot of folks have pointed to continuity of the soundtrack overall, and like the battle theme needing to be disruptive by nature should be a problem, but it's not for some reason. So to mirror the environment, the music must include sonic ruptures and harmonic blockages that impede the player's movement. Flow demands obstacles. I really liked that idea. Flow demands obstacles. So then finally, to kind of bring it all together in a sense, we have Noriyuki Iwadare's 2 different battle themes for Grandia 2 from 2000, depending on whether the player enters into battle in a defensive or offensive position. So fight version 1 is if they take the initiative. Fight version 2 is if they're caught unaware by the enemy. And both have elements of harmonic stasis, but you'll hear that the first one is much more active and harmonically energetic. It lands on A minor, the bass grinds on A for 15 measures, the upper voices end up creating harmonic tension, and then version 2 remains on an E minor 7th chord until victory. Oh, I didn't grab these. Right, hold on. I will grab them. Wild.
It's a lot of different examples in this one.
Grandia 2 fight version 1. Yeah, oh, there's multiples too. Version 3 came up.
Yeah, I think version 3 is I think a mid boss theme. Okay, here. If that's it.
Yeah.
Oh, that brings me back. Just the first snippet of it.
All right, let me make sure I'm sharing to the stream here. YouTube. There we go. It doesn't really matter that y'all see it as long as you can hear it. I'll just stick that anywhere. Okay, so here's a little bit of Fight version 1.
And then here. And then finally it changes.
So yeah, no, it's not that it's not allowed to change. It's we just need to stay in the same place for a while to kind of like get us into the flow. And then here's version 2. think I like version 2 better.
Version 2 is fantastic. There's a couple of amazing solos in this that are beautifully constructed.
But you can hear this one's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Boom. It's very prog rocky. It's like we're just having an extended jam on that moment.
On the single chord. I think it was this piece particularly that really clued me into that there was something going on here, because I don't know. I'm having flashbacks to being maybe 17 or 18 years old and listening to this on my Walkman back when we had such things, and washing dishes, and like, this is so satisfying to listen to. But I was taking probably freshman theory or something. It's like, wait a second. The bass hasn't changed and it's been 3 minutes in. I should be trying to gouge out my eyes now. Why is this so musically satisfying when nothing is happening harmonically?
Yeah.
And it really is. It
just goes to show you there's other ways to create musical interests that are not chordal complexity.
Yeah.
Turns out that we can do things metrically and rhythmically and
all these other ways.
Yeah, texture, timbre. Oh man, we can vary all these other things. And of course we know from our fields of study that snaps, that this is one of the reasons that sort of like old school formalists often struggled with popular musics, because it was a question of, okay, if we don't have that, and that's the system I've been really trained in, and I'm used to looking for, like, what's working about this music. And then if you wanted to look at timbre, for example, it feels like it's hard to talk about in objective terms. Now we have like Megan Lavengood doing amazing work in that area, and there's been a lot of progress on it, but it feels a lot less concrete in some way. And so yeah, we're seeing all our theorists kind of branch out here and show us all these ways that this music is engaging and complex, and it doesn't just have to do with, I don't know, the public being somehow less sophisticated, or whatever, just because they're listening to these musics. Like, no, they're finding things in these musics that are really powerful.
There's a lot going on, even if you do a harmonic analysis and the music disappears. There's a lot that can't be captured by that.
Where's my Erlini? I don't know. That sounds like a personal problem, Pete. It's the descending Mario cadence, Pete. Perfect.
Oh, nice.
So, I said da capo here because you talk about going back to the opening questions. Ha! It's cute. It's a musical pun. So to quote, battle themes function by articulating the space in which the battle takes place. This articulation happens over a number of parameters, but among the most important are the juxtaposition of busy minor key surface textures and a driving bass line that grinds in place. To be effective, a battle theme has to negotiate both the continuities and discontinuities of the space in which the game takes place. A battle theme has to immerse the player within the battle arena while also frustrating them, providing a sense of musical and spatial release when they finally can exit and continue on with the game. So back to Ni no Kuni. Has the audio-visual transition to battle, long periods of harmonic stasis, and a fanfare for victory. So it checks some boxes, so what's wrong with it? Nothing, actually, but why does it not work as a battle theme? It fails to hold within itself the essential tension of a battle theme. The harmonic ground is not reiterated strongly enough. The textures are not sufficiently chaotic to provide a convincing backdrop for the on-screen action. The orchestral sounds are beautifully rounded, where they would ordinarily be noisy and penetrating. The bass line is elegantly suggestive, where in other games it would assault and violently restrain. I think I typed that wrong. Restrain the player, not retrain. The music mirrors neither the immobility of the space nor the mobility of the action. So you can... I guess you could choose one or the other. Maybe, yeah, but ultimately, like, you kind of need both. You need immobility of the space and mobility of the action. But this does none of them. Like, if it did one, it might be slightly more effective. So again, the music isn't bad, especially listened out of context. It's great on its own. It's just it's a departure from convention in a way that hasn't worked for a lot of players. And early in the article, and of course Will commented on this as well, like there were quite a bit of responses to this. A lot of, if you look up articles on the music, Kotaku articles and things that don't always concern themselves with music at all when evaluating the game, there were a lot of comments on how the battle music didn't work. And of course there's forum posts and discussions, and this has been kind of a long-standing issue with this. And these games, I think, are generally pretty loved by fans otherwise, but there are those things that don't quite work musically because it is coming out of that like filmic perspective of just like making this beautiful, like if it were just one battle and it was scripted, the battle theme might work really well, but it just doesn't seem to capture the energy that we need.
I'm a huge Joe Hisaishi fan, so I felt like I needed to say, like, this music isn't bad. It's not matching the conventions that have developed over, the 2 decades or so before.
Right. And I think that can be a really important thing. I don't like when people try to claim music is just bad. Because most of the time bad is even like, okay, let's grant that it's bad, like questions of whose value judgment is that aside. Okay, so the music is bad. That's actually really interesting. Like, that's such an interesting productive space. And I feel like bad often just shuts down all of the possibility of like examining it, which is why I really like this one. I like how you framed this. You've shown us all of the conventions in order to explain like why this one doesn't seem to work for people, despite it being a really beautiful, well-constructed piece of music. Otherwise, it's just not constructed according to what players are kind of expecting, their horizon of expectations around what a battle theme does and should be.
And in that sense becomes actually kind of really illuminating for, well, what are these conventions?
Right. And then we get this whole article, which again, I think is just a beautifully packaged summary of what happens. And so often, I guess let me say the actual conclusion, that I can kind of ruminate for a sec. This then is the sound of the grind, a musicospatial stasis that creates satisfaction through harmonic frustration, continuity in discontinuity, and immobility within chaos. So good. What was I saying? Oh, what's really nice. So I have often said that we sort of take for granted in Ludo some of these functions or these topics or tropes within game music. We talk about town themes, dungeon themes, battle themes, and it's very clear. Everyone like can picture that. They're like, we have a sense of it, but it turns out doing the work of actually defining what some of these functions are that are more unique to games, not that they're not informed by film and television and other media and orchestral traditions and all of that, but we do have things like battle that are scored very differently than they might be in a film. And doing the work of actually fleshing out, like, what is this thing? It turns out has been hard. And I won't call anybody out by name, but like I've seen a bunch of kind of not convincing attempts to understand this phenomenon. So it's really nice to start cohering in the literature like this article what these things are, and so beautifully demonstrate them. And so convincingly, and then have a good model from which the rest of us can kind of have the same analytical basis, foundation. So, also, I wasn't thinking of anybody in particular, so it's not like I'm shadow calling anybody out. I just feel like there's like this attempt to kind of wrap our head around it, but actually setting it down, I don't know. I find like topical type work difficult to do well.
And this, I had lots of help along the way from some really wonderful interlocutors during NACVIGM conferences. This, in 2019, and then at the Music and the Moving Image conference, some really key changes that went into the development of the article version from those earlier versions, and really good peer reviewers too, by the way.
That's nice. Yeah. Do you know who I guess you wouldn't know who they are necessarily.
I don't know. I have my suspicions about
suspicions.
one or two of them, but I'm not going to say that in a public venue.
Yeah. That's always nice though when
they were really good, and if you were one of them, thank you so much, because sometimes I've not been as lucky with my peer reviewers. Sometimes you get a bad peer review, but the peer reviewers for JSMEG were really, really good and really helpful, and also challenging too. I had to change some things.
Yeah,
it's good too.
Which is ultimately a good, that's kind of the best gift, is that attention and that care when it's done in a way that feels constructive. I talk with Elizabeth. I'm one of the JSMIGgy people. I've only worked on a couple so far, but even when I've been like, okay, this needs substantial revision for whatever reason, I haven't had one yet that I'm like, no, this isn't up to par, or shouldn't be published at all. It's always, I like this, I think it needs this, and trying to make sure that my tone is right, and that I convey that through my comments, and that it feels very collaborative, and here's what I think is really, really interesting here, maybe bring this out more, do this, with the idea that hopefully that conveys at the end of the process that I'm not just throwing my weight around, or being a jerk, or trying to be that reviewer too. Nobody wants to be a reviewer too, so making sure that the space feels really constructive is important to me. And I always talk to Elizabeth, if I send one back that has a lot more recommendations for even big changes, I'm always do a tone check for me. How does this read to you? And she said she appreciates that, because it maintains rigor, but it does so without the other person feeling completely demoralized. Because I've gotten the quote that something was unpublishable trash.
Yeah.
And you're like, what do
happens.
I do with that, right? And the funny thing was that I don't remember if they hit reject even saying that. It was just sort of here's all the things that it's missing that it could need, and that was where my advisor was very helpful, that able to say find the constructive even though it's phrased very poorly, and very mean, that see what you can take, but also it's an important lesson that you don't necessarily have to do every single thing that people have their different biases and their different backgrounds, and sometimes they're searching for citations for themselves or for their friends. Sometimes they throw a citation at you that kind of, you're like, wait, what? What do you mean? Or it would just be a totally different article, if you even got into that area. So you have to kind of learn to balance and sort of advocate for your own voice, which, especially in early stage, feels impossible.
Yeah.
You're I just got to do everything the editor says, right? Or everything the peer review says. So I like that you had a good experience. I think so far
I was very grateful for that. That's
been the norm with JSMIG. Everyone on here that I've featured that's been one of their writers has said, yeah, everyone was great and supportive, and it was a good experience publishing. So that's a good thing. Think about folks that are I'm one of them. I have yet to submit to JSMIG. I've helped review a few, but I haven't had the wherewithal to sit down. And I have 2 potential projects, and I have to just pick which one is more viable for them. But I look forward to that process, because I've heard nothing but good things about it. So I love this one. I think it is just such a worthy entry into the literature. As I've said, I think it's very assignable, which, so things can be really good and really high level, but, maybe not assignable to the non-majors. And I think that there's enough rigor here. You can do it with the majors, and they can get into the ins and outs of the transcriptions and, some of the harmonic stuff. But I think what's really nice is that you've modeled it in such a way that it works on the level for somebody that doesn't read music either. Like they sort of understand what stasis is and what you're talking about in terms of like the rhythmic drive. And certainly if you then have them listen to the examples, they may not know what everything means, but they're like, oh, okay, I can hear that. Like I get it. And that's really hard to do well, where it's kind of working on multiple levels at the same time. So kudos to that, because it's so cool.
Thank you so much for that, Dana. As you know, Dana and I were talking before. I'm still in the academy somewhat, but I've transitioned into a lot of other work as well. I'm working as a choir director. A lot of my work at this point is teaching young children to find middle C, which is excellent work, and someone needs to do it, and it's good steady paycheck. But it's been really nice to have a kind of seminar discussion again, and of my own work. This has never happened before. So thank you so much for this. This has been just a real joy, and it was so much fun to also look through my files, remembering the creative process here and thinking, oh, maybe I need to start submitting some more stuff. I mean, I could take out a little bit of my Netflix and Twitter time. I could write something again. I have more projects in me. So thank you so much for this.
Send it over to something else. Yeah, I'm really thinking now. I'm doing a video game class in the spring, which I've always offered asynchronous video game stuff in the summers. This will be the first time I'm doing not in person. It'll be virtual, but it'll be like a twice a week thing with undergrads. I don't know if it'll only be undergrads, but I think it's mostly undergrads. But I'm starting to think about like, oh my gosh, we're actually going to have like a meeting. Like I could have people come be guests. So I may be reaching out to you because I was thinking like, what if I do Julianne's Final Fantasy IV with this one? That would be a really cool week. Maybe I could have Julianne one day, you the other, or like have you both come at the same.
Or
that
panel
would be
discussion.
Wild. That would be wild.
Wonderful to get back together with Julianne.
That would be
amazing.
So yeah. Oh, good. Will Ayers assigned this to some grad students to read just a couple weeks ago and spurred great discussion. Love the article. Thanks. Awesome. Yeah, so folks,
it's great to hear.
Pete loves it. So some good. Yeah, I love that idea of assign. Like it didn't occur to me until going over it just now. It's so good with Julian's article because like the way it builds out from it. And yeah, then you can look at the Final Fantasy IV examples as she spatializes and temporalizes them, and then look at what's happening here as well. They're just beautifully paired. So. Love when that happens, when you're like, that's 1 week of syllabus done.
Yep, it's a good feeling.
It's a good feeling. That's part of what this whole thing is about. Like being more conversant myself, reading more, knowing more of things that I should know, or like maybe didn't read close enough the first time around, or maybe didn't get to read because life. Because I'm also a performer, and I wear many hats, so. We all are always feeling behind on our reading, but I just want to help y'all build your syllabi and build your bibliographies for your research, and we're all benefiting. The rising tide lifts all boats. What's that phrase? Something or other.
And I'm actually seeing one of my students outside the studio, so I have to sign off now. But thank you so much. This has been wonderful.
Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you, and I appreciate all of you that are watching. Next week, as you'll see in the Discord, is no Kudo, at least not on Friday. What's going to happen instead is I'm going to attempt to stream my AMS panel on Thursday, and that'll be at 2:45 p.m. Central. Or 2:15 p.m. Central, and we'll see. If it doesn't happen, then I will record it and make it available. But otherwise, I'm gonna let Stephen go.
Take care, everyone. It was wonderful. Thanks so much.
Yeah. We'll see you all. Yeah, I'm just gonna hop out there while I finish up because it's a student coming. But so that'll be the plan for next week, and then the week after we have Alexander Kalesa coming to talk about Bloodborne, and that's going to be really fun. And then the week after is Thanksgiving. So if I do anything on Friday, it's unlikely, but if I do, it'll probably just be like an actual gaming stream of hanging out, kind of like an end of semester hang. And then from there, I get to make some decisions about what December will look like. I haven't quite decided. So I know I'll take a couple weeks off at the end for the holidays, but yeah, so that's kind of where we're at, and y'all are great. And yeah, next week is AMS. I'm going to do my best to make things accessible, make them available. And again, that may involve streaming. I'm going to try to bring down my Yeti Blue like in my bag and have my webcam with me. And but the size of the hotel, and I know there's been concerns about the Wi-Fi not being robust enough. So if it's terrible, I may not stream it live, but I will record it using like Streamlabs, and so I'll have a local recording that I can then upload with the permission of anybody else. Like obviously I'll upload mine, but I'll get permission from anybody else. If not, I will be live tweeting robustly any session that I attend that has any kind of a Ludo focus. So follow me on Twitter at Musicologess. For that, I'm usually pretty good about like hashtagging, making it really clear. Like I like to do like the threaded things now, where I can have all of the tweets on a single paper kind of nested, so they all go together, so they are a little easier to navigate. But that's the plan. Thank you all for being here, and enjoy your Friday, and see you next time.